Welcome to my channel. If you like the content, please subscribe for more.
Emotional affair while married. Greetings. I'm struggling with the situation and I'm hoping to get some perspectives on it. My wife and I have been married for a few years, but due to visa issues, we've only been physically together for 2. Recently, her father passed away and she started feeling a strong desire to have a baby. I agreed to try, but it turns out I have fertility issues. While I was dealing with that, she went back to her home country for a wedding. Before she left, I found a notebook where she had written another man's name on 3 pages and called him the love of her life. When I confronted her about it, she initially refused to tell me anything, but eventually admitted that she had been talking to a guy she met online through gaming for 3 months. She had been playing as a man to avoid being treated differently, and she even told people she wasn't married. I was hurt and shocked by all of this, but she left to go back home before we could really talk things through. A month later, I demanded to know more about the situation, and she told me that she had been emotionally involved with this other man. We've tried virtual counseling, but she's said some things that have made me question whether or not we can trust each other. She's accused me of using her emotional affair as an excuse to delay having a child and has said that I wasn't emotionally available. While I have been taking care of everything at home, including household chores, cooking, and finances, she's been playing games on her iPad for hours on end. I'm struggling with feeling like I'm being manipulated by her, and it's hard for me to believe anything she says anymore. She's currently still out of the country, and I'm thinking that maybe divorce is the best thing for us, even though I still love her. I just can't get over the trust issues that have come up. What do you all think? Is an emotional affair just as bad as physical cheating? Do you think I'm being manipulated by her? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Story 2. Upon entering my house, I noticed several bridal magazines scattered across the dining table with my wife and daughter deeply engrossed in a conversation. It was a serious discussion, one that made them look startled when they saw me. Despite announcing my arrival, they didn't seem to hear me at first. Katie, my daughter, looked at me and confirmed that they were discussing her wedding plans, but she didn't want me to participate. Her spiteful tone didn't faze me much, as I had grown accustomed to it over the years. I couldn't help but remind her that I was her father, and it was my responsibility to attend her wedding. I didn't think it was fair that I was being excluded from the conversation, especially given the fact that I had been the sole provider for our family. My wife joined in, assuring me that it was better to have someone like me present than no one at all. Although I reluctantly agreed with her, I couldn't shake the feeling that my wife and daughter didn't hold me in high regard. It was true that my wife had been a homemaker since our marriage, and my 22-year-old daughter was still unemployed after graduating. Even though I had been the one supporting them financially, I had received no recognition or appreciation from either of them. Despite this, I still considered myself to be a member of the family, and I couldn't fathom not attending my daughter's wedding. As the conversation came to an end, I left the room, feeling a sense of dejection. It seemed as though my efforts to provide for my family had gone unnoticed. However, I knew that regardless of how they felt about me, I would always be there for them when they needed me. Even if it meant attending my daughter's wedding without her approval, I would be there to support her on her big day. In an effort to improve my relationship with my family, I made a conscious decision to change my mindset and become a better provider. I wanted to be more present and involved in their lives, and so I changed the subject to discuss the details of Katie's wedding. I asked if they had set a date and if we would be introduced to her partner and their family. My daughter informed me that they were planning a small wedding with only close family and friends. The ceremony was scheduled to take place the following month, as Katie was already pregnant and wanted to hold the ceremony before her pregnancy became noticeable. As she spoke about her partner, who was still a student, I couldn't help but feel a pang of bitterness. I was reminded of my own past and the mistakes I had made. At Katie's age, I too had gotten my wife pregnant while I was still in college. It was a foolish decision, one that had led me to drop out of school and take on a job to support my growing family. As a result, I had missed out on many opportunities that would have been available to me had I completed my education. Despite the bitterness I felt, I was determined to be supportive of Katie and her partner. I didn't want them to make the same mistakes I had made, and I knew that my experience could be valuable to them. As we continued to talk about the wedding, I made a silent promise to myself to be there for my family, no matter what. My introduction to my wife was at a party I attended during my college days. I was invited by a friend who had made plans with some women he met at a department store. At the party, we drank and had a good time, and I woke up the next morning in a love hotel with my future wife. We decided to start a relationship, but there was a major complication. My wife had become pregnant that very same night. With that unexpected news, I dropped out of college and married her. As a result, I had to find a job to support my family, and I eventually found work as a traffic officer. Despite the important role I play in ensuring public safety, my wife and daughter think it is an unskilled and boring job. However, they don't understand the demands of the job and how difficult it is to work under harsh weather conditions. During the summer, I have to endure the blazing sun, and in the winter, I have to go out into the frigid cold. My job as a traffic officer requires me to be adaptable to any situation. Sometimes, I even get heckled by passing drivers and pedestrians. Nevertheless, I don't dislike my job. I owe it to my boss for hiring me, and I get along well with my coworkers. However, things turned sour between me and my daughter when she was just 14 years old, and I've been trying to mend our relationship ever since. Before Katie's behavior turned sour, she used to belittle her father for his job as a traffic officer. However, he took pride in his job as he had a specialized certification and knew that the work he did was important for society. Despite his daughter not yet understanding the significance of his job due to her young age, he believed that she would eventually come to appreciate it. One day, while working near his daughter's middle school, he saw her walking home with some friends. He smiled and waved at her, saying, "Katie, get home safe," thinking it was a perfectly normal thing for a father to do. But to his surprise, his daughter scowled and ignored him. A co-worker who saw what happened commented that Katie was at that rebellious age and gave a wry smile. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. He received an anonymous complaint that one of his traffic officers was harassing someone. He was shocked when he found out that the only person who could have made the complaint was his daughter. Despite this, he still tried to understand her behavior and hoped that they could reconcile their differences in the future. The incident with my daughter left me feeling disheartened and hurt. I had always believed that my daughter would understand the importance of my work as a traffic officer someday, but her attitude towards me seemed to suggest otherwise. As I reflected on our conversation, I realized that it wasn't just about my job or my daughter's embarrassment in front of her friends. It was about the fact that she had lied to her friends about my profession and was unable to accept the reality of who I was and what I did for a living. I knew that my daughter was going through a rebellious phase, but I couldn't help feeling frustrated and disappointed. I had always tried to be a good father, providing for my family and doing my best to be there for them whenever they needed me. But it seemed that all of that was not enough for my daughter, who was more concerned with fitting in with her friends and maintaining her image. Despite everything, I knew that I couldn't give up on my daughter. I had to find a way to help her understand the value of hard work and the importance of respecting others, regardless of their profession or social status. I decided to take some time off from work and spend more time with my daughter, hoping that we could mend our relationship and bridge the gap that had formed between us. In the end, it was a difficult journey, but one that was well worth it. My daughter eventually came to understand the importance of my work and the sacrifices that I had made for our family. She learned to appreciate the value of hard work and the contributions that people like me make to society. And most importantly, she learned to love and respect me for who I was, regardless of what I did for a living. What happened with my daughter has left me feeling hurt and disheartened. Despite my hopes that one day my daughter would appreciate what I do as a traffic officer, her behavior towards me gave me reason to doubt that this would ever happen. After giving our conversation some thought, I realized it wasn't just about my job or my daughter's social humiliation. It was about how she couldn't accept the truth about who I was and what I did for a living, so she lied to her friends about my occupation. It was inevitable that my daughter would go through a stage of defiance, but that didn't make my frustration and disappointment any less intense. In the past, I had worked hard to fulfill the role of a father by providing for my family and being there for them whenever they called. My daughter, however, seemed less concerned with those things and more concerned with maintaining her image among her peers. I knew I had to keep fighting for my daughter no matter what. I needed to find a way to teach her the worth of perseverance and the necessity of treating people with dignity regardless of their station in life. I took some time off to focus on my daughter and tried to repair the rift in our relationship by simply being there for her more often. It was an arduous trip, but the end result was well worth it. Eventually, my daughter realized the value of my efforts and the sacrifices I'd made for our family. She gained an understanding of the importance of hard work and the benefits I provide to society. And most importantly, she accepted me for who I was and loved me anyway, regardless of my profession. As my wife and daughter continued to insult me, I couldn't help but feel angry and frustrated. They were ganging up on me, and their insults were getting worse with each passing day. I had always worked hard to provide for my family, but my wife kept hounding me to make more money. At one point, I even considered taking a long-term position that was far away but more lucrative. My wife said she would stay at her parents' place while I was away, but it ended up being a disaster. They stayed there until my wife's brother wanted to move back in and kick them out. My wife treated me like a distant relative who just comes to visit sometime. My in-laws could see the logic in my arguments and scolded my wife for not treating me like an actual husband. But her attitude never changed. Days and months went by, and my daughter grew up just like her mom, always insulting me. Recently, I noticed that even if I took a little extra time to get ready in the morning, my wife would start harassing me, telling me to get to work and get my useless ass out of the house. My daughter even joined in, saying that I sweat so much that our whole house stinks. It felt like I was going to get kicked out of my own house. I gave up trying to defend myself and just left. After all, my daughter's wedding was already next week. As my wife and daughter continued to insult me, I couldn't help but feel angry and frustrated. They were ganging up on me, and their insults were getting worse with each passing day. I had always worked hard to provide for my family, but my wife kept hounding me to make more money. At one point, I even considered taking a long-term position that was far away but more lucrative. My wife said she would stay at her parents' place while I was away, but it ended up being a disaster. They stayed there until my wife's brother wanted to move back in and kick them out. My wife treated me like a distant relative who just comes to visit sometimes. My in-laws could see the logic in my arguments and scolded my wife for not treating me like an actual husband, but her attitude never changed. Days and months went by, and my daughter grew up just like her mom, always insulting me. Recently, I noticed that even if I took a little extra time to get ready in the morning, my wife would start harassing me, telling me to get to work and get my useless ass out of the house. My daughter even joined in, saying that I sweat so much that our whole house stinks. It felt like I was going to get kicked out of my own house. I gave up trying to defend myself and just left. After all, my daughter's wedding was already next week. As I stared at the photo of my wife and her partner, my heart sank as I realized that the man in the photo had curly hair just like my daughter, Katie. Despite the shock, I couldn't deny the striking resemblance between the two of them, and I began to wonder if this man was actually Katie's biological father. I had never been too concerned about it before, as my wife had always assured me that Katie looked like her grandfather, but now I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. However, with the wedding just around the corner, I pushed these thoughts aside and tried to focus on the upcoming event. I couldn't let my personal issues ruin my daughter's big day. When my wife realized that I had proof of her affair, she tried to downplay it, saying that it was all in the past and that it didn't matter now since our daughter's wedding was the next day. but I was completely done with her attitude. She didn't even apologize or take accountability for her actions. I couldn't forgive her, not after what she had put me through. After the argument, my daughter woke up and asked what was going on. My wife and daughter only cared about themselves, never considering how their actions affected others. Disgusted with them, I went to the bedroom, feeling both angry and relieved. The next day was my daughter's wedding, and I couldn't be happier. I had been living a lie for so long, pretending that my daughter was mine. But now that I knew the truth, I felt free. I knew that I could move on with my life and find happiness elsewhere. After the wedding, I went to see the lawyer again. He assured me that he would do everything in his power to get me a win in the divorce proceedings. I knew that it wouldn't be easy, but I was prepared to fight for what was mine. As I left the lawyer's office, I felt a sense of liberation. I was no longer tied to my wife, and I could finally live my life on my own terms. It was time for a new chapter in my life, and I was excited to see what the future held. As my wife continued to shout at me, I calmly continued to pack my belongings in my travel bag. I had grown accustomed to packing quickly for work, so it only took me a few minutes to gather my things. Looking at how little I had, I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. However, my wife didn't find it amusing and accused me of being creepy. She then demanded to know where I was going, but I didn't see the point in telling her. Why should I attend the wedding of a child who wasn't even mine with a wife who had deceitfully betrayed me? Instead, I took a deep breath and spoke my mind. I told her that I had tried my best to be a good husband and father, but they had both treated me terribly for so long. I was tired of being used as a mere bank account and being insulted and abused day after day. I couldn't continue to live with a wife who had an ongoing affair and who showed no remorse for her actions. I then dropped the bombshell that Katie wasn't even my child, so I wouldn't be providing any financial support to either of them. I had had enough of their mistreatment, and if they wanted me gone, then I would disappear. However, they would have to pay for what they had done to me. I can't, Katie, I said firmly, shaking my head. He's married and living with his in-laws. Even if he doesn't love his wife, he can't break up with her because his father-in-law is an executive at his company. If he quits, he'll be broke. My wife grew upset at my refusal and warned Katie to be careful not to get caught cheating. But my daughter just laughed and said, I wouldn't screw up like that. He loves me too much to doubt me. I was shocked to hear Katie's words. It was as if she had learned nothing from her mother's mistakes. But at least their deception gave me the proof I needed for the divorce proceedings and trial to get compensation for the affair. Both went in my favor, and even the DNA test proved that Katie was indeed the child of my wife's illicit lover, who happened to be the son-in-law of a certain company executive. He had worked at his father-in-law's company, but lost his job when his wife divorced him. It was poetic justice. I even contacted Katie's husband's family and had them listen to the recording from the wiretap. As soon as they heard it, he filed for divorce and sued her for damages. It seemed that finally everyone was getting what they deserved. As Katie continued to yell at me for ruining her life, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. It wasn't my fault that she had tried to deceive innocent people, and her anger only served to confirm her guilt. The family of Katie's husband expressed their gratitude towards me for helping their son and even wrote me a check for my efforts. With the money I received, I was able to finally divorce my unfaithful wife and sell our house. I made sure to take out the amount owed to me for damages from my wife's portion of the sale, leaving her with nothing. My in-laws apologized for their daughter's behavior and even disowned her out of spite. Now, my ex-wife and her daughter live together in a small, cheap apartment. As for me, I am finally able to enjoy my life without being abused or mistreated. I have plenty of free time and money to travel for pleasure and visit the many friends I have made during my travels for work. I am grateful for the peaceful life that I now have